All right. Welcome to our first episode of our retirement crisis webinar series. We will be talking about building real financial strength and navigating today's money challenges. I'll be your host for today. I am Ben Meck. Today's episode should, by all means, be a wake-up call. We're going to be talking about something that affects nearly every working American, and that's the growing retirement crisis. Whether you're just starting your career, hitting your peak earning years, or preparing your exit strategy from the workforce, the rules of the game are evolving. The traditional retirement model isn't what it used to be. This episode is a wake-up call and a way forward. So to get things started, we're just going to put up our disclosure slide here. So please take a minute to read that. And this webinar will be recorded. So by all means, please feel free to go through this and visit our website for any additional information after this today. So to introduce ourselves, my name is Ben Meck. I'm a CPA and a CFP. I've been a Baldwin employee for about 2 years now. And prior to that, I worked in various operational accounting positions leading up to my position here today. So I'm the Deputy Managing Director of Accounting Services for Baldwin Family Office. Now you'll also see Joe Much here and Matt Civitello. I'll give those two guys the opportunity to introduce themselves. Joe, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Ben. My name is Joe Much. I'm a CFA charter holder, been with Baldwin RKM for about 2 years. I'm an Associate Managing Director at RKM. My background is mainly in investment management, analysis, and financial planning.
And Matt.
Hi, my name is Matt Civitello. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of Tax Services here at Baldwin. Been here about 2 years, just about as long as Ben. Come from background about 10 to 12 years of small and larger firm accounting and payroll services. Focusing most of my time on tax, kind of the tax guru around here. And take it away, Ben.
All right, so we are talking about understanding the retirement crisis today. So it's a big word. It's a scary phrase that gets thrown around. And so to start, this is going to be a series of 6 webinar episodes. And so to start things off, we want to really begin by understanding what is the retirement crisis. And so we're going to be going through just some general information and some general tips. And then as our webinar series progresses, we'll get more and more specific with steps and planning advice as we go. So to get things started off, Joe, if you want to take things away with our general information, why don't you go for that?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. And thanks those of you that are here today. And if you're watching this on replay, we appreciate it. We hope to give some useful information and maybe you might learn something. So let's start with the big picture. As Ben alluded to earlier, the U.S. retirement landscape is very different than what it used to be. The pillars people once relied on, those being pensions, strong Social Security, and long-term employer loyalty that provided stable careers and earnings, haven't fully disappeared, but are disappearing. And this has led to a massive shift in the retirement responsibility, which was once on the shoulders of the institutions that employees worked for, has now shifted to the individual. We say the word crisis, and we've identified a couple of trends that are at the forefront of this and might exacerbate it in the future. Trend number 1 is the United States has an aging population. Back in 1970, the median age in the United States was about 28 years old. Back in 2022, that age had risen all the way up to 39. There's a multitude of reasons for this, but at the forefront, it's mainly advances in healthcare. People are now living longer. which means your retirement could, in theory, last 25 to 30 years. That dramatically increases the amount of savings that are required. Additionally, I mentioned it earlier, the decline of pensions or defined benefit plans. In 1980, 38% of all private sector workers had access to a defined benefit plan or a pension. Today, that number is under 15. And of course, it's going to vary by industry and sector. In some areas like the financial activities have greater access to it, but on an industry average in the United States, we're looking at around a 15% access for employees. Lastly, the ever uncertain future of Social Security. I'm sure you've heard it many times, be it on a news station or our politicians talking about Social Security. But as it stands right now, the trust fund is due to be depleted by 2035, at which point incoming taxes will only cover about 83% of scheduled benefits. When I say the word the trust fund will be depleted, it doesn't mean Social Security benefits are going to stop. It just means that the benefit amount will be reduced. And Social Security has already had a difficult time keeping pace with inflation, even with occasional large jumps that you see, especially coming out of COVID.
Let me just jump in there real quick, Joe. I wanted to say something about this. I mean, it sounds to me like, you know, kind of the 3 or 4 pillars that originally held up this stool of retirement for all Americans are kind of being eroded or being kind of cut back in different ways throughout the years. And less social promises, you know, from back in the 50s when all this was kind of spelled out. But originally it was kind of, you know, 3 big ones, you know, pension, Social Security, and then individual savings. And it sounds like pensions are certainly on their way out. I mean, less than 15% being available to Americans at this point is kind of crazy. I mean, that stool pillar is kind of completely falling apart. And now Social Security, you know, unless there's some big changes, and, you know, I don't want to get into politics here, but, you know, ultimately some tax raises as well as maybe some expense cuts on both sides to get this to kind of make sense and keep that 100% for as long as possible. I mean, there's definitely been some different legislation packages that have been proposed, but, you know, there's still no like definitive answer. And, you know, I'm sure we're going to have to wait until, you know, right on the cusp of 2035 before this problem is totally fixed. But again, that's another pillar that's kind of really in danger. So more and more of it sounds like retirement falls to the people themselves. I mean, it's going to be personal savings, it's going to be 401ks and that stuff. So ultimately there are some options available, but it definitely sounds like a lot more of the burden lays at the feet of the people now, unless maybe some companies are, you know, certainly pensions and even the government are kind of crumbling a little bit here.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Matt. Yeah, you mentioned the government intervention. At this point, if Social Security is to continue on and be fully funded, it's not going to be because we get a larger tax base. That increasing age number is not going to change in the next 10 years. We're not going to go from the average age of 39 back down to 28 in 10 years. That takes a long time. It's going to have to be through government intervention. And what that looks like could dramatically affect, you know, what your retirement might look like, depending upon what age group you're in.
As well as
yes, those are great points, and especially, you know, mentioning age groups, Joe, is a great way to lead into, we mentioned the problem, but what does that actually mean for people? And as we were preparing for today's episode, we determined that, you know, the answer to that question of what does this mean for me strongly depends on how old you are. That's not always going to be the case for everything that's, you know, financial question related, but for this one in particular, the retirement crisis questions, the answers strongly depend on age. And so for the viewers, we split up the age groups into 3 different sections. The first one that we're going to be talking about today is for ages 20 to 39. The second segment is going to be 40 to 59, with the third segment then being 60 plus, just kind of general. That you know, the age limit for that last segment is going to be very variable. So if we just get things started with that youngest age group, those just entering the workforce in their early 20s.
Sure. And yeah, so you mentioned if you're in your 20s or your 30s, retirement most likely seems like a distant goal or something you don't think you have to worry about. But the thing is, you've got the greatest asset on your side right now, and that's simply just time. Some of the things that I see as major risks to somebody in their 20s and 30s and their the prospect of retiring. We mentioned it earlier that the Social Security, you've got a long time until you're going to be eligible for it, and who knows what it's going to look like. We've shown that something is going to need to change in order for the funding to remain at a certain level. And while we don't predict what the U.S. government is going to do, it seems like an increase in taxes is probably likely at some point before these younger individuals are eligible for Social Security. And the farther you are away from it, the more that burden is going to fall on you. Secondary, under savings seems to be a big problem when it comes to younger workers. They underestimate how much they need by the time they reach certain age. To give you a couple of examples, it's not going to be the same for everybody, but a good rule of thumb is by age 30, you should aim to have about 1 times of your salary in retirement savings. And by 35, that number jumps to about 2 times. And some strategies that we give out to people who, in this age group that, ask us for help. First and foremost, first thing we ask is, are you enrolled in your employer's 401k? If your employer offers a 401k. We understand not all of them do, but if that is on the table, it's something that you should at least be contributing enough up to get the full match. On the individual retirement side, look into IRAs and Roth IRAs, especially if you don't have an employer-provided retirement plan. Specifically, the Roth IRA is usually recommended for younger individuals. Their income is not typically that high starting out, so they're not above the limit, and those Roths are going to offer that long-term benefit of tax-free growth and flexible withdrawals in the future. Lastly, avoid something called lifestyle inflation. You get out of college, you're starting your first job, you work for a few years, you get promoted, you start making a little bit more money. Usually your income is going to increase pretty steadily over these first decade or two of work. You want to make sure that your savings rate is keeping up with that, because your spending is likely to go up when you start making more money. You want to make sure that you are saving the same percentage moving forward.
I think that's actually a really good point, Joe, because I think a lot in this cohort, the 60 to 39, I mean, lifestyle inflation, it creeps up. I mean, it obviously, we're all relatively young guys, but we remember in our 20s, like there's certain things we're not making a heck of a lot of money at that point, but things certainly add up. There's big purchases that have to be made, maybe a car, maybe just to get to and from work, maybe rent for an apartment or something, or wherever you're living at the time. But it's just really important to keep saving, because your dollars when you're younger are obviously worth way more with compound interest as they go through life. So the more you can put in as early as possible, the better it is. Obviously, realistic goals, you want to try to save as much as you can early. But, the other 2 options, again, 401k, great match options. I know we're going to talk about, every kind of retirement account under the sun in the next episode in this series, including, Roth IRAs as well, which offer great tax-free growth as well as tax-free withdrawals, later into retirement after 59 and a half. So we'll definitely touch on them. But I think there's some unique action points, I think, for this group in particular that kind of set everything up and can, build into the future for all the rest of the categories. So, Joe, I know you want to talk some about them.
Yeah, just pretty simple. You're at a stage where your habits are going to matter more than your big numbers. Just some very basic action steps that I tell people in this age group who are interested. Set a monthly savings goal tied to your income. And if you have trouble, doing it manually, you can have it set to come out automatically. You mentioned the, visualizing your retirement, what it looks like. It might be hard to imagine, saving $200 a month into an account that had a zero balance at it. Is that really going to turn into anything at the end of the day when I'm all said and done working? Now, if you start with just $200 a month at the age of 25 and you assume a modest return of about 7% over 40 years, that $200 a month turns into $500,000 by the time you're age 65. If you started that 10 years later at age 35, that number drops to only about $250,000. So really, time is on your side in this regard. And if you have questions, sometimes your situations are not overly complicated. We recommend you meet with a financial advisor to build a starter plan, something simple, something that you can tie to a goal. You said, purchase this car, maybe buy a house, plan for a wedding in the future. These are all things that you can start saving to today.
Yeah, I think it's very important to make sure that we know that something is definitely better than nothing, and that the baseline begins now. And so we've talked about that first age group there. This next one is kind of deemed the catch-up years, and is typically when you're meeting the peak of your career, the peak of your earnings. So let's dive into the ideas and tips for the side that's in their 40s and 50s.
Sure. And you touched on it a bit. Your 40s and 50s most often are going to be your peak earning years. You're pretty well established in your career. You're making good amount of money, but usually they are the most financially demanding. If you've started a family, if you have children, if you have a mortgage, these bills can really start to add up. And retirement might start to feel just a little bit closer. It's still pretty far away, and you still do have the benefit of time to make impactful changes if you think you might be behind. The sad reality for most Americans, or I'm sorry, not most Americans, but for many Americans, is that according to multiple reports, one of which the Federal Reserve's an economic well-being report, 28% of non-retired adults have no savings at all. And only about 31% feel that their retirement planning is on track. When you're in this age group, it might be easy to think Social Security is going to be there. And I don't need to worry. I don't need to have this excess saved up. Because we've already shown in about 10 years, unless dramatic action is taken, there might be a reduction in benefits, or there could be an increase in taxes leading up to that. And if you're in your 40s or 50s, more likely in your 50s, that Social Security could coincide right when you might retire as to when you might be taking those benefits. Again, in this time of your life, you've got high expenses and lifestyle pressure usually. You get a lot of responsibilities. So you want to make sure that you do leave room for savings. This is often the stage where financial pressures, from mortgages to college costs to possibly even caring for aging parents, represents a major risk on your ability to save for retirement.
And I think too, I mean, if you're looking back to kind of what we were talking about with 20-year-olds to 30-year-olds, like whatever habits they start then are only going to be amplified later in life. So I mean, this is just the next stage of that. But I think a lot of people in this age range, unfortunately, do rely or think that Social Security is going to be like the one-stop shop. This is all I'm going to need in retirement. I can save kind of the same way I've been saving, but I mean, if you're kind of behind or you're feeling behind, I mean, there's still time to catch up in the 40s. In the 50s, there's a little bit less time, but still, it's definitely worth having that conversation, I think, with a financial advisor, as well as just making sure that it all makes tax sense as well. So, I mean, I know us at Baldwin here, we always like to think about it holistically and try to look at the whole picture from the investment side to the tax side to the accounting side. I mean, and another big piece of that too is the savings and trying to push those savings higher and reduce that debt. So that piece of it, I mean, you're looking maybe towards the end of your 50s to maybe paying off a mortgage or getting close to paying off that mortgage, maybe getting out of car debt and staying out of car debt, staying out of credit card debt. Certainly, trying to knock off those student loans depending on the balance size and where it all fits into your whole financial picture. But it's definitely the time where it's getting serious now between 40s and certainly in your 50s. I mean, it's crunch time in the 50s, but in the 40s, I mean, the earlier you can act, I think the more time is on your side, you have a little bit more wiggle room and options.
Yeah. Ben, you touched on a lot of the strategies and possible option steps. We could start with the managing debt. You're likely to have debt at this point in your life. If you've car, education, mortgage, and anything else, you want to make sure that you manage it wisely. If you've got high interest debt, such as credit cards, you want to work to, if it's possible, to pay those off as soon as you possibly can. Because you're getting no tax benefit from that, and they usually carry a really high interest rate. Some ways to boost your savings. You should be making some good money at this point. You want to maximize your retirement contributions, or go up to what you think you can afford. If you're over 50, you're eligible for catch-up contributions. And these dollar amounts, much like that $200 a year I mentioned earlier, in the $200 a month when you're in your 20s and 30s, even these incremental changes can make big differences. But one thing I do want to point out is when you're in your 40s and 50s, it might be time, if you haven't, to take a look at how your assets are allocated. It could be you've worked for one company for the majority of your working career up to this point, and you enrolled in their 401k or their whatever the employer retirement plan offered to you was. You might want to take a look to see how risky that investment is. Do I still view myself, if it's risky, am I still willing to take on that much risk, since I do have a little bit less time and I've got other obligations? Or does it need a rebalance? And somebody like myself and people at Baldwin, that's what we do. We can certainly help with that. Lastly, if you haven't created a financial plan, we would recommend that you meet with somebody just to see where you're at. You're likely at a time where you've got a lot of goals that you want to fund. Could be paying for a kid's college, could be a wedding for a child, could be costs, as I said, of taking on an elderly parent, and all that is going to weigh on your retirement savings. And if you already have one, if you haven't updated it in a while, might be time to update it. Things that worked out 5 years ago might be different now, might have different obligations. I think what we'll leave here with this group is, though, even if you're behind, consistent action in your 40s and 50s can drastically improve your retirement outlook.
Very, very great points. Matt, do you have anything else to add in for this age group as tax concerns can evolve as people age?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe really hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is definitely, the time in most people's lives where they're going to be making, their peak earning years. They're going to make that most amount of money, and then it kind of stays where it is or flattens out into their 60s and beyond. But I think just understanding, what needs to be done, saving on taxes at this point in life may be more of a concern, especially the 50s and above. And there's also a lot more levers to pull. And I know we're going to go over this in our next episode, but catch-up contributions, super catch-up contributions, all these different other options. And just, the government definitely set things up, and they set these certain retirement accounts up in certain ways so that, you can contribute more to them and do that and get that catch-up that you need. It might not look like a lot, but over the course of 10 or 15 years, if you're 50 and you want to retire by 65, I mean, there's definitely some things that can be done and definitely some growth that can happen in those years. And it's something to really take a look at. And the other big thing is just, we're always here for you at Baldwin. We, as Joe had mentioned, financial planning is a big piece of it. Investment management's another piece of it. And tax and accounting work is the third pillar. So, I mean, we're always here for you. And I think that, we try to be worth your weight in gold whenever we talk to any of our clients, but certainly something to start the conversation with us about, and we go from there.
Yeah. When you're young, when you're in your 20s, you're just getting out into real life. The plan can be hoping for the best, but once you hit these middle-aged brackets, best plan is not hoping for the best. So we definitely want to lock in strategies, and really those strategies can evolve as reality sets into place. But it's important to just start. And so I think we've talked pretty heavily about this middle age group, which is very important, because I think that's where that where you have a heavy weight with retirement. But we are now going to get into the third age group that we're going to be talking about today, which is essentially 60 plus. And there's a lot of things that happen when you've reached that big 60 birthday. Once you've gotten past that, there are a lot of evolutions and changes. There's more rules. There's different items that come up. And so let's take some time to talk about this age group of, you've either retired or retirement's on the doorstep.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. And yeah, retirement is either you've recently retired, you've been retired, or you're winding down your career and you're looking forward to retirement. Unlike the previous two stages where it's about accumulation, this age group, it's about maximizing the benefits of what you've built, minimizing potential pitfalls, and strategic decision making becomes even more critical. Along with this comes some unique risks for this age group. Once you hit 60, you might start thinking about Social Security. When do I claim it? Does it make sense to claim it now versus later on and get a larger benefit? How you withdraw from your accounts, both your retirement accounts that are pre-tax, post-tax, or non-retirement account. How to structure that to avoid high taxes or the risk of outliving your savings. In this age group, you've got less time for recoveries from big market shocks. Large swings in the market can dramatically affect the retirement capital available. And healthcare at this point in life usually becomes one of, if not the major cost for most individuals. And you want to work that into your plan.
I think you hit the nail on the head too here. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts in this time of life, especially for retirees starting at 60 and then even into the future. I mean, eventually we're talking about RMDs, required minimum distributions, talking about Roth conversions, a bunch of different items that we'll talk about in later segments of this webinar. But claiming Social Security too early can really limit the amount that you're getting. And you worked all these years to kind of accumulate, put into the system, but then taking it too early kind of like cuts it off. It's a one-time thing, and you can't really like adjust or make any changes past that point. Also, obviously, waiting too long, that there's inherent dangers there as well. But it's also looking at, your family history. If your parents and grandparents live to be very, very old, very, very old, and I mean that's a something that you kind of have to take into account and make sure you kind of look at your longevity and such. But another piece of it is poor withdrawal sequencing. So that ultimately comes down to a lot of different tax laws that come into place about when you're taking from certain buckets, traditional Roth or just your normal brokerage accounts, different tax rates and all that. So ultimately at this time, it's very worth kind of having a conversation with me, with Ben, with Joe, just to kind of see what and when should we, what lever should we pull when, and kind of go from there. And healthcare is also a piece of it too. I mean, 65, everybody takes Medicare, unless you're still working past that point, but there's different levels of Medicare now with different IRMA things, different IRMA levels, I should say, as well as different insurance policies. And that's a whole other topic in and of itself. But Joe, there's definitely some key strategies. And I know we've kind of talked about these at length before, but if you want to point some of these out to this third group here.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on a lot of them. We'll go back. You mentioned previously the super catch-up. If you're in your very early 60s and you're still working, starting in 2025, they've added the super catch-up for employer retirement plans, allowing you to put even more aside for retirement. We'll get into that more when we dive into those plans, but there's some income limits that affect how much contributions are applied. But just know that there are now new contribution limits for individuals of a certain age that are starting in 2025. The delaying of Social Security strategically, this is a big question that I get a lot from people when they're thinking about claiming Social Security. When should we do it? And you talked about family longevity. That's a question that we ask. There is a break-even point at which if I live to this point, I take it this, or I take it then, it makes sense. And obviously, it can all be different. Just because somebody in your family lived a long time doesn't necessarily mean you were, or the inverse. But postponing those benefits can significantly increase monthly income. In some cases, on the two ends of the extreme, that can be up to 30%. You talked about planning your withdrawals to be tax efficient, deciding on which accounts to draw from first, traditional, Roth, or taxable, all while trying to minimize taxes and preserve savings. One thing I did want to point out, something a little bit, we want to make sure that your risk tolerance and your capacity for risk are in lockstep with each other. Just because you might have always been an inherently risky investor, you invest in speculative stocks, fixed income was not really for you in your career. We want to make sure that you're able to withstand the volatility that comes with being how risky you want to be. Strike that good balance between growth potential and security that you're going to need in retirement. Obviously, Medicare is the big topic for once you reach that 65 age. Reviewing the supplemental coverage, other healthcare options, what you might do as a long-term care option. Do you have an insurance policy in place? Do you want to put down holds on retirement communities? Researching those retirement communities, making sure that they're a fit for you and it's cost effective. And lastly, managing any remaining debt you might have. You still might be paying a bit of the mortgage off, some loans, credit cards. Obviously, we plan to, we always, as we said, for the 40s and 50s, we want to reduce those balances if possible. All that kind of works together when it comes to planning for clients at this age. And just a couple of action steps. You might not want to hear it, but sometimes we do tell people when we build a plan for them. If I want to retire at 65, what does it look like if I retire at 67? Postponing retirement for a couple of years can dramatically increase what your likelihood of not outliving your assets in retirement looks like. Matt, I think you touched kind of on when you're going to get to the retired minimum distribution age. You might want to map out your withdrawals to make sure that you're minimizing tax spikes. And this could involve things like Roth conversions, in the years between retirement and when you're actually forced to do that. And anything else to add to that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some other action steps in there, and obviously, meeting with a financial advisor is a big one, and just kind of trying to plot this out a little bit, especially like with RMDs and Roth conversions. I mean, I'd love to see someone at least on the tax side in here, maybe at like 60, to say, okay, here we have like 10 to 15 years, depending on birthdays, to get to where we need to be. If we have big traditional accounts, we want to try to whittle them down so you're not getting killed in taxes with those RMDs that require minimum distributions later in life. And the other thing too is, I think there's a mindset shift here, because obviously people have been working their whole years, usually W-2 jobs, and you get to a point where now we're pulling money from investments, and this is a new task for many. It's a totally new feeling. So we're pulling money out to make sure that we can live in our expenses, and now we're worrying about the market more. Now we're worrying about where the money's coming from. Is this the most tax efficient way? So it can definitely cause some anxiety, and all of a sudden there's a lot of different things that pop up during this time, and a lot of different questions just kind of come out of nowhere because it's a totally different way of funding a lifestyle. So I think.
So, speaking of which, I just wanted to jump in here. Just wanted to reiterate very much that we're talking a lot of generalities today, but all kind of the advice and somebody's actual plan needs to be very personalized, and I think that's something that there's a lot of general advice out there. We're doing it today. We're putting general advice out there, but not all of the ideas and strategies will work for everybody's situation.
Right.
And so the withdrawal strategy, that's going to be based individual. If you're doing Roth conversions, the timing for that, it's going to be, highly based on your individual situation. And, healthcare and long-term care also being items that are going to be highly personal. And we had a comment come in asking about the worth of buying long-term care insurance, and that's going to be a highly personal answer, based on your entire situation, and then also kind of family history. If you have a family history for, cancers or, diseases that take a lot of time and effort for cures and rehabilitation, that's going to be, a definite deciding factor on whether or not it's worth it. You might be in a situation where your savings are such that you can get by without having long-term care insurance. But we do have, if we're not having the conversations, if you're not having conversations with us personally, me, Joe, and Matt, we have a whole network of other people that have specific answers to these questions, and we're there's so many of us out there who have specific niches for I'm very good at helping somebody with answer these questions, that it's definitely worth asking, because all of us in this industry are sitting with knowledge that we're looking at every day. We're looking at we're reading articles, we're hearing the news, and it's we're doing this because we have a passion for it, and we're really just waiting for people to ask. And even if you feel like you might be one of many that are asking the same questions, we definitely want to make those have those conversations where we're giving answers, or at least providing our feedback. So we just love having those questions come in, and we also have access to the the calculators that we use to show the black and white economics of plus and minus this. You get this cost for this benefit, and that's also going to be very personal based on your entire situation. So I just wanted to reiterate that while we're kind of finalizing this age group here. But I think we essentially had touched on a very meaty portion of our general advice for the age groups. So I think it would be important to reiterate some of the general advice that we would have for anybody watching this or listening to this now or in the future.
Sure. So yeah, just if you take anything away from today, regardless of what age group you're in, whether you're 25 or 65 or older or in between, I think there are some fundamental truths that can apply to everyone. One, Social Security is not enough. I don't think it ever was meant to be. And as we've seen over the past couple of years, its erosion and what it's able to buy and the uncertainty surrounding it is cause for concern. And it really should not be the one area that you rely on to completely fund your retirement. If you want benchmarks, there are some pretty good rule of thumbs for your retirement savings, what it should look like by a certain age for most people. By 30, as I said earlier, it should be about 1 times your income. By 40, 3 times. 50, 6 times. And then by the time you get to 60, usually we recommend about 8 to 10 times your income. And as we said, with all age groups, if you're uncertain about your situation, or you've worked with an advisor in the past and they've built a plan and hasn't been updated in a while, getting it reviewed and updating is very important, especially if it's been a while. What worked 5 years ago might not work today. If you're behind, just know that you're not alone. This is a problem that's affecting a lot of Americans. The solution is not to panic. It's to plan. We started this webinar out saying that there is a retirement crisis, but I think we can all agree it's not a hopeless situation. There are steps that you can take, no matter what your age is or your situation, to protect and grow your financial future. I think the sooner that you take action, the more options you're going to have. If you're unsure where you stand or you want some guidance on your next step, all 3 of us, as well as our colleagues at Baldwin and RKM, are willing to sit down, do a readiness check with you, see where you stand, and listen to your goals, answer any questions you might have, and happy to work with you to build a path forward.
Great. Well, it looks like we don't have any further questions sitting in our queue here. So
I just want to add one thing to that. Is it worth buying long?
Definitely.
You did mention it is very dependent on your situation. But I will say this, just the nature of what the long-term care market has done over the past decade, pretty much the entirety of the time that I've been in the professional workforce, it has become pretty expensive. Usually, if you are already in your mid-70s or you have serious health problems, I would probably say it's probably not worth it, simply because of the extremely high premiums, and it's very difficult to qualify for. But again, it does depend on everybody's situation.
Matt, did you have any other closing, generalities or specific, tips or tricks you want to throw out here?
No, just more good vibes, good feelings. It is daunting to kind of look at this. I don't care if you're 25 or 65, like Joe said, or anywhere in between or above. It's a big deal, and it's the rest of your life. And we want to make sure, again, everyone has the best retirement that they can, and have as much money as they need throughout all those years, and not fall victim to any other kind of shortfalls anywhere in that process. But there is hope, and no matter kind of where you're on the process, I think there's some good action steps to take, as well as just universal things to keep in mind as you go through it. But I'm going to echo kind of what you said, Ben. It's very personalized. It's a custom plan for everyone, and I think it needs to be, because everyone's situation is different, and it should be, because everybody's different. But again, there's always a path forward for everyone, and it should be a hopeful situation.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so let's just close this out by kind of talking about our path forward. Our team at Baldwin is working towards putting out more content. We're working towards this webinar series. This is episode 1 of at least 6. But Matt and Joe and I, and the rest of our team, we love talking about the stuff that we're passionate about. And really, that doesn't do anybody any good. Just kind of sitting on that information. Besides it being fun to talk about. So we want to put, we want to provide our point of view. We want to be able to give people advice who are willing to listen to it. And just for this webinar series, where we'll be going with this, we're going to dig into different types of retirement accounts. We'll dig into different investment strategies that are out there, and how they pertain to the different stages of life. We'll be talking about tax efficiencies and where the tax laws as they stand today play into the whole long-term planning strategy. And then we'll also be talking about how the whole idea of retirement is that you're also getting and addressing the mortality of your life. So where does that also play into your estate planning as part of it, and an overall legacy for yourself and the future. So we will be putting out information. I'm just going to be putting up our contact information here for a few minutes. We'll be watching the comment section here. If there are any other questions that pop in while we are live for the next few minutes, we'll address them here, or they'll be addressed in a future webinar. And also feel free to call us, send us emails. Again, we love answering questions. So here is our contact information. Thank you very much, everybody, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks for your time today, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to our viewers.